the Within Orb podcast. Come get Within Orb. Welcome to another episode of Within Orb, and today, beaming in from Ohio, we have Erwin, one of my favorite astrologers, who just presented on Neptune and fashion for the ISAR Star Club, and I had the privilege and pleasure of hosting that, and it was such a fascinating deep dive, and I could not stop looking at things differently after your talk. Erwin, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Jen. I'm stoked to be here to chat astrology books with you. And that was such a fun session that we had with ISAR. It was so fun to share my research on Neptune and Aries. And yes, I do actually have a background in costume design with an emphasis on historical pieces. So it was fun to share that with you all.
You know who else has a history of costume design?
Who?
Reinhold Ebertein's mom, the most famous astrologer in 20th century Germany. Elsbeth Ebertein grew up in a tailor family, and they made all of the costumes for all of the different plays happening in their region.
Oh my goodness. Well, of course you know this because you're like the number one expert in the world on Elsbeth Ebertein.
Yeah, but I had no idea you had a link to costume design, and so did she. This is so cool.
Wow.
We should start a whole club.
I love learning this.
I know, right? Like, we need a club of like fashionista astrologers where it's like, okay, we're just going to go into all of the signatures and we're going to get all the costumes out and do all the fashion. Yes. Yeah. All right. So back to basics, though. How did you get into astrology? What was your first astrology book?
So the gateway into astrology was, of course, horoscope columns in the back of like Teen Beat magazine. But I found my way to astrology at my local bookstore, and I found just like some smaller, just basic, here's your 12 signs, here's like the 12 zodiac signs for your sun and your moon. But the book I want to share with you all today, like the first book that really took me down the rabbit hole of astrology, knowing that I could learn about the zodiac placements and the house placements for all the planets, was Astrology, a Cosmic Science by Isabel Hickey. And my grandma gave me this book. She found out I was getting into astrology. She was really into astrology. I didn't know how much she was into it at the time. But from the time that she gave me this book, we've bonded over astrology. And she actually wrote the date that she bought the book in it.
Wow. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, she has her name written in it, and October 14th, 2000. So she gives me this book. I'm carrying it around with me. I'm reading charts for everyone. I'm giving everyone delineations. I'm underlining every page in this book. And I'm raving about it to my grandma, and she goes out and buys another copy.
Whoa.
For herself, which I just inherited again because they're moving into assisted living. So I'm getting a bunch of their astrology books as we speak.
That's amazing. Yeah. So, all right, here we go. I'm going to put you on the deserted island, and I want to know, in addition to your ephemeris, what are the 3 books you're going to take with you and why?
Oh my goodness. It's so hard to choose. But I think I'm going to have to start with Abū Ma'shar's The Great Introduction.
That's a heavy hitter.
Oh, yeah. And every page is juicy of this book. And it's like 600-page book. So a few years ago, I started really getting into some of the more foundational texts of our lineage, like ancient astrology texts. And this one is not only, I think, one of the more easier ones to follow, it also gives a lot of rationale for a lot of the things and the systems that we take for granted. Like Abū Ma'shar explains why Mars and Saturn are malefics. For example, there's a lot of emphasis here on temperament that he goes into. But I sincerely felt while reading this that this is such a solid foundational text that I would love to maybe one day teach a class just based on this book alone, simply because it covers everything, like everything that we use in our more like traditionally rooted modern astrology practice.
And I could see that philosophical underpinning to ground it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, part 1 of the book is all like in defense of astrology. And he goes into how how we can observe that the sun and the moon have a definite impact on nature. Like we go to sleep at night when the sun sets, and then he talks about it in like that diurnal fashion. And then he talks about how nature goes to sleep when the sun is at its lowest arc in the sky in the winter. And so nature is responding to the planets. And he says astrologers also understand how to sensitize themselves to the other planets like Mercury and Venus, but you have to like be initiated and you have to study in order to tap into that in the same way that a gardener learns to be sensitive to the different seasons and things like that. So the first section is all about why astrology is valid.
Yeah, I love that nuance too of like the primary motion with the secondary motion in that we sleep every day, nature sleeps at winter.
Yeah.
More or less. I mean, I know animals sleep in between that, but like this gardening metaphor of like the plants waking up in the spring and then the plants going to sleep in the fall in a way.
Yeah.
And that perennial moment. I mean, it wasn't until just even the last 5 years and living in the same place for once that I could understand like what it means to have an annual plant versus a perennial one. And you see them come back and you're like, oh, hi, friend. It's time for you.
My favorite.
Yeah, right. And it's like, oh, that can happen. It's very neat to see because you're totally not in, I mean, you're in control of maybe putting it there if you're in a gardening mood. But then when it comes back, it's like, all right, I'm here. And you go, oh, there you are.
You knew what time it was.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and he's very confident about, yes, like why, like, of course we're influenced by the planets. So he's pointing it out like it's so obvious.
Yeah, like pay a little bit of attention. Come on. I love that. I love that. And it's very
Yeah.
cool to see like the word great introduction. He means it, right?
It's a very accurate title.
Very cool.
It's an amazing introduction to astrology. And if you are practicing astrology, you're somewhat familiar with the traditional concepts that are pretty popular nowadays, and you've been wanting to read a traditional text, like an ancient text, go read this one because it's, like I said, it's pretty easy to follow and you're going to be able to connect with what he's writing about because you're already familiar, but then you're going to get so much more.
What did it do to your modern astrology after reading it?
Well, I'm already, like, I would say that I'm a modern practitioner, but certainly I'm using like a blend of modern and traditional techniques. But it just plugged it all in a more enriching and encompassing sort of way. Like I was familiar with most everything in the book, but the way he weaves it together, it was just like of course this is the rationale. Like of course this is where this all comes from and how it's all connected. So again, he puts a lot of emphasis on the temperament of the planets, which is why it kind of put me on a path to learning a lot more about temperament. So one of the books that I didn't put on our list is Dorian Greenbaum's Temperament book, but that one is a really good one. And then I got into my second book, which if you don't mind, I'll just bring that into the conversation.
Of course, yeah.
My second book is going to be Saturn and Melancholy.
There it is. It's a hefty one.
It's a hefty coffee table piece right here. This one, it's a favorite. A lot of astrologers like this book. It's a little bit of an investment. It is a more expensive book. So a lot of people like put it on the wish list and eventually you're going to cave into getting it. And I would highly recommend that you do. It's a dense book. It's a book that focuses on the history of melancholy. And it starts out with Aristotle, the four elements, the four building blocks of the universe, and how those four elements that create existence, they wanted to know how those show up in the human body. And so we get the translation from the four elements into the four humoral temperaments. And Abū Ma'shar focuses a lot on that. So that just like made me want to learn more about the temperaments. I'm like, okay, this is what's missing for me. And this is the next thing I need to study. And so I've been on this major deep dive on temperament theory for the last several years. And what's insane about it is that the very first astrology conference I went to in, let's say, 2010, it was an NCGR conference. And the very first lecture I went to was on the elements. But I forget who the astrologer was, but she was going into detail about temperament theory. And I was sitting there like, oh my God, this is so boring. I just want to know. I just want to know how to read people's charts. And it was like a total full circle moment of like, okay, now I really want to know hot, dry, cold, wet. Like, give me all of that.
Yeah, right? I love that. Oh my. Yeah, it's sort of like, it's sometimes that moment of, if you're having a little bit of antipathy towards it, that's exactly the medicine you need in the end, you know?
Totally. It was a little seed planted.
For sure. Well, I know a few things about this book, Saturn and Melancholy, because I encountered it a lot in graduate school when I was that pesky grad student who had never let astrology go. In every class I took, I was always like, but astrology. My professors were like, not again. There she goes. Why is she so stubborn? But in this one, it was one of those safe spaces where the Warburg group were talking about astrologers and astrological theories and concepts in ways that I could cite. So it was like a citable source, you know. And I was only later, when I paid a little bit closer attention, that this book was started with research in German, but it was first published in English. And then it got retranslated back into German.
Oh my gosh. So of course it makes sense that you've encountered this text.
Yeah, but it was published in English first because they were fleeing Germany.
Oh.
Right? So they took their research with them, yeah. And then they were landing, I think it was Princeton, and they landed in the United States, and they ended up finally getting the research out. By that point, Fritz Saxl had died, but they included him obviously in the list of people.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until many decades later that they retranslated it back into German. Like there was fundamental parts of the research that were German, but they ended up publishing it in English. And then they took that whole package and translated it back into German.
Wow.
I keep saying back into. I keep meaning to not say that. They translated the English one into German for the first time as a complete edition, even though the rudiments of it were published in smaller portions in German before the 1933 takeover of German culture.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I know. It was kind of weird because you think about cultural transfer and these, you know, in the German world, and I think maybe in like a lot of scholarly circles, like everybody wants to be a child of Saturn. But like I was a child of Saturn. You know, like me, pick me. I'm Hamlet. I'm a child of Saturn. I'm, you know.
Yes. And they talk about that, how historically, like to be a child of Saturn was like virtuous. It was like, I don't know if heroic is the word, but it was noble. Like you were smart, and because of the weight of the wisdom that you carry, you were burdened by it.
Or like you think about what it is to be a scholar. Like you're alone in a library a lot. And guess what happens in the library? Silence. You know?
Completely. Yeah. And the book, it goes through how then there was like other periods where melancholy seemed to be more corresponding with a particular ailment, and then other temperaments in different cultures were seen to be more like the one that you would aspire toward. But I got through this book, and it is a dense book, but I was determined.
Yeah.
And I got through just like wishing there was one for all four of the temperaments. Like I wish there was a sanguine that I could read this dense. I mean, this is a big book.
And does it have all of the images that they're referring to in the art history?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the entire art history section too. Yeah.
So there is a portable version if you wanted to be very, you know, efficient on this island, but it's in German and there are no pictures.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's quite a text. But did this book lead you to Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy? Because that's another humongous one.
Ooh, well, now I'm just going to have to write that one down. I may have written it down. I have, every time I read a book like this, I have like a booklet of notes stuck in the middle of it. But yeah, I'm going to have to write that one down, Jen.
Yeah, the Anatomy of Melancholy is enormous. So, I mean, all these Saturnian books, they're basically like, we're going to plant you here and you're going to be reading for a long, long time.
Yes, and that's my logic. If I'm going to a desert island and I can only bring a handful of books, I want to bring a book that I need to go back and reread because it's a commitment. It's a long text, but I do need to go back and reread it. It's just that good.
And it's a mini art museum because they've talked about so many different pieces of art.
So many.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I love that. And I love being able to share a little bit about the paratext, right? Like sort of the making of and the challenges they went through to even bring it around, you know? I think if you consciously invoke Saturn, you're like, I'm just asking for a detour and taking a really long time.
Yes, exactly. Maybe that explains our tech outage today.
Maybe, yeah.
Invoking Saturn.
Right? Oops, Saturn knew it was coming. So it was like, I'm just going to put Zoom out. We're recording this on April 16th, by the way, everyone. So I'm predicting now, even though it's still not tomorrow yet, that everyone's going to be like, remember when Zoom was out? Anyway, now we do because it's oral history. So what is your third book?
My third book is going to be Erin Sullivan's The Astrology of Family Dynamics. So bringing it back into our modern sphere. I love this book by the late Erin Sullivan. Family dynamics is something that continues to enthrall me. Being a mother of, I have a almost 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I'm just like, while I don't obsess over their charts, I do enjoy having their charts and knowing about their charts so that I can better understand them and be a better guide for them. Also, when it comes to like big family events, like such as we just moved and I was trying to figure out when are we moving. And so I'm thinking about it in the context of my chart, my husband's chart, my children's chart, like that move is going to show up. So family astrology is something that is always on my brain. And Erin Sullivan's book was the first book that really introduced me to that kind of theory, to thinking about how our charts are not just random. Our charts are connected. We have family patterns that show up through the astrological charts. And therefore, while I can't say with confidence that we choose our parents, what I can say is that our birth charts are not random.
Yeah. What is that knowledge of knowing they're not random? How does that track with your experience of giving birth? In the moment before, I mean, it's like literally that's someone's chart coming out of you, you know?
Yeah. Well, literally, it's not like I had my phone in hand looking at where the planets were, but if you do astrology long enough, you don't need to be looking at the chart. If you kind of know generally where the planets are right now, you can calculate a chart in your head. So I had a 30-hour labor with my daughter. And when it came time to push, I was like, okay, there's a Taurus rising and there's no Taurus risings in my family. So I think I'm going to be here for a while. And 3 hours later, I had a cesarean and it was a Cancer rising like me. And it made sense. My daughter's a Cancer rising just like me, just like my mom, just like my grandma. So.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to have, with Dagny, also a cesarean, I was like, all right, they said you have time in the day to choose when it's going to be, right? But it had to be that day because there was, like, situation. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, we can just pick. And then it turns out that she had her own ideas. And it wasn't the window of time passed for whatever I would have elected. And it was like she chose her own chart, really.
Yeah, it's wild. Like, and yeah, sometimes you do, like Erin Sullivan talks about that, like how sometimes like you might think it's going to be a certain rising sign. Like you might think that your child is going to have a chart that looks similar to yours, your spouse. But she also talks about children who sort of break those codes up, those patterns up. She calls them black sheep, or she calls them even like, I think the one that she calls that one is the black sheep, where like the person whose chart is the most different is often like this black sheep archetype. So she offers these different archetypes for how a person's chart fits into the constellation of their family, which is really neat.
I love that. That's so interesting too. Like thinking back to what you were talking about with temperament, the black sheep might have this temperament mismatch with the rest. And so there's this kind of energetic static or friction.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. But wait, so when you chose Dagny's rising sign and then she chose her own, how did you choose? Because I think that's such a tall order. How did you feel about choosing? Was it like an easy decision or?
It was all happening so fast. And also, like, she just needed to get born. So it wasn't like I was going
Yeah.
to be like, let's wait until 11 p.m. They were basically like, this, or this. And I just looked at the three options and I was like, that one. And
Okay.
then it just ended up, there was, you can't control other people. So, like, this person had a delay, and then that was a delay, and then this happened, and da-da-da. And things just took their course. And so I'm sitting there, immobilized on a table. There's nothing I
Yeah.
can do literally at that point. But I knew the transition points because I had looked at the timings. And so as that minute approached and then got past, I was just like, oh, there it goes. And you could just sort of see the possible future shifting into the next sign. And like, I was like, okay, cool. The funny thing is, though, it was shortly thereafter that she did actually take her first breath. And so I was saved by sidereal because the sign that I thought was going to be the Western tropical rising is the Eastern. So depending on your zodiac, everything is still okay. Imagine stepping into a room of 5,000 astrology books, turning a corner and stepping into a room of 2,000 more. The Celestial Arts Education Library is every astrologer's dream, and it can be yours. I invite you to come support CAELi before you can visit physically. Your support will mean the creation of 52 new episodes of Within Orb next year, 4 issues of the CAELi Review, our inaugural journal, and countless book talks, events, classes for our community. Visit our website, www.caeli.institute/support, to select your level of care. Please help support CAELi into the future, our future, so that we may study the future together. Thank you for listening. Please enjoy the rest of the show. They do pick their own chart.
They really do. And because I offer family dynamic readings, and probably because I'm a mom with younger kids and I share about my family, I attract people who are starting families. And I have a lot of clients coming to me to talk about their family dynamics and especially with their newborns. And I have people coming in who want to chat about planning a cesarean or planning when to get pregnant and things like that. And something I always want to lead these conversations with is that our children choose their charts. And yes, we can pick a date to plan your cesarean, but your child is probably going to have their own plan. And my mentality around this, Jen, is that how is it any different than the astrologer choosing a date and a time to go in for a planned delivery than the receptionist at the doctor's office? Why can't the astrologer have a hand in deciding that? And not that we ultimately decide, but that we're facilitating. And if that's what makes the client, the parent feel better and more at ease, then we've done our job. Because I know a lot of people like to debate the ethics of like, oh, I can't decide when a child's going to be born. And I'm just like, well, the receptionists do it all the time. So why can't we? And then the child kind of just like riffs on that plan
Right.
to their liking.
Yeah, they do definitely riff on it in terms of, coming early, coming late, whatever that due date was supposed to be. They're like, no, I know my due date, and like, this is my time to lock
Completely.
into that pattern. And, Wendy Stacy talks about this too, with doctors deciding that they were only going to be working from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So cesareans were only going to be day charts. And so now we have an entire generation of overwhelming day charts due to this trend in medical culture.
Completely. Yeah, that's a whole other interesting point of debate for
Yeah.
sure. I wonder about that.
Well, it also seems like in the 80s or before, it was okay to be over term. And now it's like, oh, if you're getting anywhere close to that term date, they're like, all right, we're going to induce. And it's like, wait, why? Why are you inducing? Really? Is it an insurance
Right.
question? What's the reason here for that induction? And I'm sure the listeners are going to be like, well, there's 500 reasons and I'm surprised you don't know about them. But it's funny. You never hear anybody saying anymore, like, I was 3 weeks late or I was 2 weeks late,
Right. Right. You hear stories about like people our age saying, yeah, I was 3 weeks late. And I'm like, that sounds horrible.
Right? Yeah. Well, I could tell, I knew from different family patterns in the charts of my husband and me and eventually my child that I knew she was going to come early because of the patterns. And then they were like, you're going to have a preterm birth. And I'm like, I called it before you did. I knew that months ago.
Oh my
Just looking at
gosh.
it was like, she's going to come. And it was also with the, as you know, like you had said, it's in your head, like the ambient planets around the time of when she should be arriving or whatever. And I was just like, no, she's going to come that way. She's not going to wait. She doesn't want
Yeah.
that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I love it. I could talk about family astrology all day. And that's why
Yeah.
I would bring this book. That's
There
why
you
I would
go.
bring this book with me, because it's a book I will occasionally go back and reread, because anytime you go back and read a book, you're going to take something new away from it. So I read this book for the first time maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And then I came back to it after having kids to gather more gems from it. And yeah, there's all kinds of, she talks about like elemental balances, modality balances. She talks about how planetary signatures are often going to repeat in the families, and they sure do.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Very cool to find that, and also to help others find it too in choosing it. And do you see it all just, I know that with biological or not biological per se, but just with these like more legal family structures, you might have these patterns. Do you also see it applying with chosen families, as in like friend structures or like sort of more less legally codified groups of people?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because family units are no longer limited to being nuclear. Family can be defined in many different ways, and families can be non-traditional. And I have much of my family is non-traditional, believe it or not. And I've been able to observe that these patterns do hold true. And also, my father was adopted, and I've since uncovered his birth mother's chart. I don't have a time for her, but my dad's a Virgo rising, and she was a Virgo. But my dad's chart also fits in with my grandparents who raised him, his adoptive parents. And yeah, I actually got his birth father's chart too, and there's some connections there as well. So certainly he has those connections with his adoptive family as well. Like there's a lot of overlap. So that's for sure a thing. And as far as like chosen family goes, there's going to be synastry there, because when you choose and you're drawn to people, there's going to be similarities.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's not going to happen, right? Astrology is there.
Yeah, I think about how opposites attract in terms of like romantic partnerships, and how in like synastry, there's going to be harmonious connections usually, but there's also going to be challenging connections. And something I've been thinking a lot about recently on that note is how, like, why does that happen? And it's because biologically, being attracted to someone who's different and has different skill sets and different vantage points is going to maximize odds of survival. But when we choose people like friendships, and I believe Erin Sullivan talks about this too, is that you're going to see more harmonious connections between like friendships and chosen connections.
Yeah, that makes some sense. Because you want to feel good with your friends. You don't want to be fighting with them, unless maybe it's in your nature to be fighting.
Right.
But I am thinking about, a friend of mine who I know we have an exact Mars square, but I love working with her. Like, I love it. So it's like maybe that gets channeled into another place instead of bickering. It's more like we can put that somewhere,
Yeah. Like, especially if it's a friend in the academic circle, like to have different points of view and to kind of motivate each other. Like that, a Mars square could be like friction.
Sharpening each other's pencil.
Exactly.
Cool. All right. Well, if you were going to sharpen pencils of students, which I do believe you are a teacher, yes.
Yes.
Yes. So what do you tell your budding astrologers to read?
Okay. Like so much. I would recommend Abū Ma'shar's Great Introduction.
As a beginner
down.
text?
Not as like a super beginner text.
Okay.
But yeah, not to like a super beginner, but let's say intermediate. intermediate. I would recommend it. I actually recommended this book, Cycles of Becoming by Alexander Ruperti. I actually just recommended this week, and I recommend it to clients and students a lot. It's not like super duper newbie, but it's still great for people who are new to learning astrology and wanting to learn more about the motion of the planets relationships to one another. He talks a lot about cycles and just like different planetary orbits. And I would highly recommend this, especially to people who are really mercurial, people with a lot of Virgo and Aquarius in their charts. This is one I would absolutely recommend.
That's so awesome. I love Cycles of Becoming as a beginner text because it really orients you in the solar system. It really gets you this idea of like, what are the recurring patterns in a unfolding of one's own life based off of the planet's relationship to itself?
Yeah, it's a nerdy text, but it also, it's short. It's not a super long text, but every page has super useful information. Like I just turned open the book to page 27, and he's talking about age. Like at age 7, you get your first square to Saturn. And he's talking about, important planetary oppositions and relationships to each other through the ages. And this was like the first book that really helped me understand all of that. Like what happens as we move through life as like specific initiations we go through.
Yeah. It's a commonality that maybe depending on other synodic cycles that we happen to be born into, we all will have that Saturn square at 7. And so for beginners, it's a perfect. I love this choice you've made because it actually really makes sense in terms of rooting the student in understanding the astronomy of planetary motion so they don't go, oh, you're in your mid-40s, you're having a Saturn opposition. And you're like, yep, that's right. That's what happens. It's like this is actually ABCs in a different level. It's an ABCs of cycles, right?
Yeah. And it's like a springboard because he also talks about eclipses and what happens if it's a south node eclipse or north node eclipse. And I think he gets into like Venus retrograde and Mars retrograde. This is one I really have been trying to reread.
Yeah, right. And flipping all the way back to Abū Ma'shar and the other side of Abū Ma'shar's career, mundane astrology, Ruperti touches on Jupiter-Saturn in one chapter.
Oh, I need to like go back and reread every page in this book.
It's a great beginner text. It's a great revisit when you're, getting a little bit too complacent in your astrology text.
Yes.
Just reminding you of those cycles. Ruperti was a Swiss astrologer who ended up helping us get the meat and bones out of Dane Rudhyar's very sometimes impenetrable prose. So, yeah. Very cool.
Very cool.
All right. So I'm super burning. I know you just did your Neptune in Aries deep dive into fashion. My selfish question is, are you working on more fashion astrology? And my unselfish question is, what are you working on now?
Yes, I would love to do more with the astrology of fashion in time. Right now, my 4th house is a little busy right now with my little ones.
Understandable.
But there are goals when they go to school to do more of these research topics. So for that reason, actually, a lot of my classes are on hold for right now. I just finished moving and, like I said, lots of 4th house stuff. But the goal is to jump back in. I have classes that I offer every year on the foundations of astrology and predictive astrology as well. And I also have webinars, and I have a progressions course available on my website. So those are the things right now. I'm also just gearing up for the conferences. I'm going to be at UAC. So
Yay!
Gearing up for conferences and things like that. So nothing else on the calendar at the moment.
Very smart. Very good. Well, I'm excited to see you at UAC, and I hope I see you before then. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your astrology life and books with us.
My pleasure, Jen. Thank you so much for hosting, and thank you so much for holding all the magnificent astrology space that you do.
Thanks for listening to Within Orb. If you loved this episode, share it with your friends, give it 5 stars, leave a comment. In Spotify, you can do that now. To learn more about the CAELi Institute and perhaps become a member or take a lab that we teach, please go to caeli.institute. That's caeli.institute. Thanks again to the E-Block Band for providing our intro and outro music, and also to Jen Brown of JJ Boots Productions for being an excellent producer. If you would like to have a podcast be edited like Within Orb, reach out to Jen. This is Jenn Zahrt, signing off for now. See you next week.